the fact. There's Israel, right on time. How are you?
Hey, Israel.
Let's go ahead and start officially. Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Lee, founder of the Hollywood Sound Museum, and I'm here with Scott Hecker. How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well on this rainy evening, believe it or not. In California, I've got huge thunder cracks and flashes in the sky.
That's so neat. I'm in Burbank, and it hasn't really hit us yet, but that's fascinating. I love that stuff. I hope somebody's out there with a mic.
Yeah, exactly. And like I mentioned earlier, my redwood deck is being stained right now and rained on. So we'll see how that rolls. Of all days, you know, like it never rains here. We're begging for rain.
Luck of the draw, man. Sorry about that.
It's all good.
Oh well. Yeah. So let's start at the beginning, as I usually do with these talks. Growing up, were there any thoughts or ideas that you would be coming into this crazy business? Were there any inspirations from your early life that you had the inkling of going into sound back then?
Not directly into the film business per se, but my dad, it all started, it sounds funny and indirectly associated with our business, but my dad said from the time you were 2, if there was ever music playing, you were dancing.
Oh.
And so I had the rhythm in me. But after that, I grew up in Ohio, and basically across the street in our backyards were woods, and I mean dense woods with ravines, creeks flowing through. We built tree forts in there. And I just remember playing in the woods and always being aware of singular sounds. The birds chirping over there, the babbling of the brook, just like when we were building tree forts, banging on the nails, how it would reverberate with the trees as a canopy and all the reflections of the sound. And that was just like, I remember that as a kid. So I was always into music heavily. And my major in college was a combo of political science and radio, TV, mass communication.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I really, because I was into music, I thought I'd love to be a radio programmer, you know, a general manager at a radio station where I could like select the playlist back then when playlists were selected and not programmed and repeated over and over again. But anyway, so I was in my last year of college in Akron, Ohio, and my stepdad, Bob Rutledge, I was talking to him in 1976 or 77. I said, "Hey, Bob, what are you working on?" He said, "I'm working on this kid's space story. It's called Star Wars." And
he kind of affects on Star Wars. That's right.
At that time, no one knew what it was going to be. It was at relatively low budget. And he was on a crew of 4. Sam Shaw was the supervisor. He was working with Gene Corso, Gordon Davidson, and a couple other guys.
That's about it. Yeah.
He said, I'm cutting spaceship sounds to World War II fight footage.
Yeah, that's right.
So they were literally using, you know,
it was before animatics. They had to figure out this new way of conveying what they were going to do, and that was the easiest way. That, you know, George Lucas saw it in his head as, you know, being directly related to that. So
yeah,
why not?
So anyway, summer came up, my last year, and he said, "Hey Scott," he goes, "how would you feel about coming out for the summer and just working with me as an apprentice driver?" And I said, "Sure, why not? California is a great place. I'd never been out there." So I went out and I drove from studio to studio, delivering film, picking film up, doing all sorts of things. But in the meanwhile, for 2 or 3 months, I was meeting all these people at the different facilities. And by the end of the summer and watching Bob do what he did, not only was he a fabulous sound editor, but he was a great Foley artist. So I got to watch him on the Foley stage, and I just said, man, this is for me. I would love to keep working in this capacity. And I literally sent for my stuff. I had my dad send my stuff, and I just stayed out there.
That's great.
Out here.
Did Blue Light have a Foley stage, or was this somewhere else, like a Goldwyn? Or
as a matter of fact, the company started out, it was called Angel Editorial, and it was founded by his mother, Evelyn Rutledge, who was a compadre with Miss Kay Rose. You know, she just wasn't as famous as Kay, but boy, she was like 4'10" and just full of fire, piss, and vinegar, man. She was
Awesome.
just a crazy cut and full, man. She loved it, but it was her own company. And Bob worked for her and Bob's sister, Lorraine Mitchell, who ended up being partners with Gene Corso. So I was working with them in a little house on Larchmont. And Sam Shaw's place was down in a house down the street, the same. And so I got to work with Sam and his crews on and off. But then Bob's mom had a heart attack. She lived, but she was getting older anyway. And all of a sudden, when she had a heart attack, Bob said, "I'm throwing you in the pool. You got to start cutting now to help out, get this stuff to the dub stage." And ironically, it was, he gave me these Hanna-Barbera cartoons that Hanna-Barbera was farming out to him because they were so overloaded.
Yeah.
And so once a week, I would go to Hanna-Barbera and go to collect all the sounds that we would need on mag. I'd go like, oh, we're running low on zips and boing. So I'd go down there, get all this stuff and roll up all the mag rolls. And
that's were they still ordered on loops back then at that point? Or
yeah, you get like repetitions of stuff. Yeah. Definitely. And that's where I met Mark Mangini and Dave Stone.
That's where they started.
Isn't that crazy? I remember meeting Mark, and he was literally working at Hanna-Barbera. I think he was working on Caveman or something.
That was his first supervisory job, was on Captain Caveman. Yeah.
Captain Caveman.
Yeah. And he had a cell up in his office for the longest time of Captain Caveman.
So. Yeah. But he was at the point where he had been at Hanna-Barbera for a while. And he was, I don't know why, but he was like, "Wow, you're so lucky to be working at like a independent place, man. I want to work as an independent as soon as I can, And I'm like, "Oh yeah, okay, there you go, dude." So I think his first gig away from there was Final Countdown or something.
It was one of the shows with Richard and Steve. Yeah, that's just before they were just about to form their partnership. Yeah.
And then Dave Stone, was there as well. So that was like, those were my humble beginnings.
I need to, this needs to be a separate show. I need to get you, Dave, and Mark on, and we can just talk about Hanna-Barbera and all that stuff from the early days. That'd be great. So anyway, yes. So moving on from there, you started getting into the feature world, or there were the Hanna-Barbera cartoons, which are pretty well. I guess I'm looking at your IMDb page. You had Yogi Space Race.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, it was fun, but I mean, starting up with Bob and like shortly thereafter, once he started working with Sam Shaw, he just started to get really popular, and the company grew, and we needed a bigger place. And so we ended up in Burbank on Magnolia, and the company, is named Blue Light Sound. It actually did change while we were still at Larchmont, but as soon as Bob's mom was out of the biz, Bob the Blue Light Sound.
Yeah, reincorporated. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's where we started, and things really just got cooking to the point where we were doing work with Chuck Campbell as well on different things. And that's when Chuck and Bob, because of the such short schedule on Back to the Future, as you know, it was like three months from principal photography to release or something.
And then they cut like 3 weeks off it again. I mean, it was going to release like mid to late July, and then suddenly they decided they wanted it out for 4th of July weekend. And then it was 2 different crews.
Chuck brought Bob and a couple of us at Blue Light, John Larson and a couple other folks. But we got the juicy stuff, man. We got to do all of the DeLorean stuff and all of the time passage, stuff through the time passages, and then the climatic scene at the clock tower and the storm at the end.
I always had a question, and some people don't remember it to confirm it. But I always just watching that film as a film fan, I noticed the very similar elements from the land speeder in Star Wars in the DeLorean pass-bys. And I always thought if that was a Bob Rutledge connection, because
there were on a few pass-bys, there were land speeder stuff in there.
That's what I thought. That always made me wonder from the very beginning.
Not consistently.
Sure.
we sort of used it sort of like anyone else would use a Wilhelm, you know.
Yeah, just a sweetener, just sneak it in there. Yeah.
Just a couple of times, you know. But we were using all sorts of different wines and wurs, and the base foundation for that engine was a Ford Bronco, though, I believe, that I think John Fasal recorded years ago. But
Right.
anyway, great recording, and it was a great set. And I think
it won an Oscar. I mean, the work, I mean, you know, you guys were rushed and under the gun and everything like that, but you know,
and that's what sort of set Bob's path and indirectly mine, you know, forward. I mean, that was huge for him to win an Oscar on that. And that was great. And then in '88, we sort of had a break where Bob didn't have any work, which was rare. And I started, you know, I got a couple requests. They said, you know, Scott, are you available? I said, sure. You know, serendipitously, you know, I've got a hole in my schedule. And then all of a sudden I just sort of went independent. You know, I'd been with Bob 11 years, and things at Blue Light got a little funky towards the end there. And I just felt like, you know, I'd been super loyal and did great work there. And to this day, I owe everything I have and everything I've learned. I owe Bob Rutledge. He's fantastic sound editor, incredibly creative. And man, there's nothing I could do to ever repay him. But anyway, I was off on my own at that point in 1988, and ended up going to Taddeo. Chris Jenkins hired me to go over there, Buzz Knutson and Chris Jenkins.
Right.
I ended up over there, I think it was like from 88 to 91. Then I just was totally independent from 91 to 97. I was just going all over, whoever, wherever, whatever studio, popping around.
Yeah, I know we share a few titles on our resumes, although, you know, it's like on Total Recall, I guess you were on the dialogue crew, and we never really saw you guys being on the effects side, which is a bit unusual, but
well, we were on the dialogue. I was supervising the dialogue, and we were over with Paul Verhoeven and Frank Uriosity in the cutting room over at Carol Co. on Sunset. And it's so funny, you know, it's like, you know, communicated a little bit with Steve throughout that, but, you know, it was pretty much divided effects and dialogue, but occasionally we would, you know, work together. And I think he had Norman Schwartz was on one show for ADR. I forget exactly.
Right.
But anyway, it was fun. You know, Paul would be putting on his jacket. He was always the first one in at work, and he was always the last to leave. But in the middle of the afternoon, he'd be putting on his jacket. I'm like, God, I wonder where he's going. Where are you going, Paul? And he goes, I'm going to Flicks. I'm going to listen to some sound effects at Flicks.
He liked to keep Stephen busy. Let's just put it that way. He liked to keep him hopping.
I know exactly what he did. He's a trippy dude. And I ended up supervising Hollow Man for him.
Oh wow.
And I actually felt, you know, bad because Steve had, you know, been doing his shows, and when I got a call from the producer to do it, and I said, well, isn't Steve going to do this? And he said, well, you know, Paul just wants to try someone else. He goes, you know, totally happy with Steve, but on this one, he just wants to try something. He's been working with you very closely, and he really liked you, and he just wants to check this out and see how it goes. Something
tells me that Stephen kind of needed a break from Paul anyway.
I don't question that because, man, he takes 150% of your energy, man, on all levels. It was very trying, but you know, I got through it, and it was all good. I had a good time with them, and
Benavente was on that show too, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
I like Mike. I'm going to try to get him on one of these too. He was with Weddington for a long time, and he's one of the best out there. So
absolutely.
Very cool.
So, yeah. Then you know,
what are some of the other shows? Yeah.
I ended up back at Taddeo in like 97 to 2000 after being independent for a while. And then when Taddeo sold to Liberty Media, I was the only feature supervisor at Taddeo, and they said, listen, we're not going to support you and your one crew here at Taddeo. You need to go over to Sound Deluxe where all the other feature sound supervisors are. And I was like, at first I was like, I said, I didn't have anything against Sound Deluxe, but I just liked the small boutique-y feeling that I had going over at Taddeo. And at first I wasn't, that excited, but I said, okay, it'll be cool. I know everyone over there, and Bob Rosenthal, I loved. So I went over there and did Road to Perdition and Rollerball over there. And right about after I was done with that, Chris Jenkins moved to Universal and got just the green light to start over on the whole sound department there. It was like a total honeymoon there. So he said, come over here and you can set this, department up however you like. You can redo all 4 floors of the sound effects building, 1 floor at a year, and do whatever you want. I trust you implicitly. And so I spent 13 years at Universal as director of the sound editorial department and kept supervising shows. So I had a wonderful run there. And
well, Lisa Varney is on our board, as you probably know, and I've heard many stories. I was friends with Bill Varney for a long time before he passed. And how soon after his regime there was your tenure? There was a gap in there, wasn't there?
It was right after. I mean,
was it?
I think Chris took over like right after Bill left. So it was like right after there. As a matter of fact, I think when I was starting, Bill was still sort of in his office and sort of wrapping up at that point.
Sure.
So, and obviously I got to mix with him, on Back to the Future. So that was awesome with Bob Thurwell and Tenny Sebastian, and it was awesome.
Going back to the Future, you were on multiple stages at once too to crank all that out, pre-dubs and dialogue, and do you remember some of the where things were? Do you have any?
Just spread all over those 3 stages over on dub 3, 6, and the Hitchcock. We were jamming. It was full tilt boogie. So we had multiple stages to cover. So it was a pleasure to go over there and represent our work with those guys. Bobby Thurwell was mixing the effects, and he was just so much fun. So it was a great experience on that.
That's very cool. You mentioned Road to Perdition. What are some of the challenges of period films like that too? Because it's when you can't just go out and record, the traffic that you need from a certain time period, and you have to be very clever about some of that sort of thing.
That was very super challenging, but it was one of the most fun parts of working on it. We did get to go out and record the 38 Plymouth.
Oh wow.
We took out an OG 38 Plymouth just to get the real McCoy.
That's great.
And had John Fasal and a professional driver, and we had like a day and a half. The first morning we're there, as you know, we try to start like at 6:30 before the birds start singing and the wind starts whipping up, and had the hood of the car up, getting ready to record, and the hood fell down on the driver's head and gashed his head. Blood, it looked like a horror film, blood flowing over his face. And we're like, I guess our recording session is over before it starts.
Yeah.
We tiled his head off and we said, we're really sorry. And, you got to go. You can't be out here in the desert with us recording. He goes, absolutely not, man. I hauled out here and we're going to get this done. He was amazing.
I tell you, union drivers are like, they're amazing.
Amazing. What a trooper he was. But we got a great set of that. But as to your question, we had to mine our libraries. And I remember we just came up with all of these different recordings of vintage cars. And we literally ended up constructing some of the backgrounds just from like cutting a lot of different hard effects and different buys. And
so you're just designing backgrounds with material that you've collected. Oh, that's great.
Absolutely. And we cheated a little bit with some older recordings, some of the older recordings that were usable. You didn't want to use anything too funky and, but but yeah, by hook or by crook. But that film, it wasn't all about, life in the city so much. It was really a subtle, quiet film, relatively.
Yes.
And so really the fun and the challenge of that film was in the detail, the subtlety, and satisfying Sam Mendes, who just has an incredible ear and is very, very deliberate, particular about every single sound. And should it be heard? Should it not be heard? And why?
Yeah, I seem to remember there was some like really interesting like rainfall in some scenes and things like that were like, yeah, the texture was just, I think it was that show.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
That movie, the whole theme of that movie was water-based.
Yeah.
From the opening credits, you hear these perfectly rhythmic wave laps with a breath attached to each of them.
Wow.
And the sound of that, actually, it was funny because we had this rhythmic sound, and then as the titles came in, the titles were coming up like sort of out of sync with the waves. And I said to Sam, wouldn't it be so cool if we could just send them this rhythm and that they could design it so each person's credit came up in sync with these wave laps. It was almost like a meditative, it sort of felt like a relaxation tape almost,
Yeah.
And Sam looked at me and goes, we're going to do that. So
wow.
He did that. So that's how the movie starts off, and that's how the movie ends. It's a bookend sound. And then the whole film has a lot of rain in it.
Yeah.
It has a funeral with an Irish funeral, a wake with a casket on ice, and with the close-up drips from the ice, from the casket, and the rain dripping off Paul Newman's fedora.
Yeah.
And there's so many water themes throughout the film. So it was actually, a very cool thread through the whole film that ended up being pretty poetic.
I remember there's some clips from it in Midge Costin's documentary, Making Waves, that they talked a little bit about.
He interviewed me for that, and I ended up on the cutting room floor. But
a lot of people did, my friend. Yeah, I'm hoping to get some of that footage for the museum.
I was really happy that she included the footage from that, because it was a very special film for me. And with the rain, it was pretty interesting. The editor was Jill Bilcock. And we were pre-dubbing all the rain in this one scene. It was where the kid is hiding underneath the back seat of his dad, of Paul Newman's car. He wanted to see what his dad did for a living, not knowing he was a hitman. Yeah. And so during this rain scene, while they're driving and they pull up and he gets out and goes into a warehouse to kill a guy, there's rain on every surface you can imagine. And we articulated that very literally, but not with hard cuts, sort of soft hard cuts with sort of small fades on each, so it wasn't too ping-pongy. Mm-hmm. And anyway, I just thought it was awesome. Bob Beamer did a fabulous job of putting it all together. And Jill Bilcock walked on the stage and sat there and listened to the scene playback. And when we were done, she said, I've never heard anything more beautiful. My God, it's just amazing. And so we were really excited. Yeah, so then next Sam came in and we played the same scene, and he's like, you've done a beautiful job of mirroring the image, but I just don't want to hear all those different textures. I really want it to be much more congenial and in one range.
Yeah, fluid throughout. Yeah.
Bob Beamer said, well, give me a couple hours, Sam. I'm going to go through and try to, bring this all together a little bit more so it's not such disparate sounds on the different cuts. And so he did that, and Sam listened to it and he said, no, I just want one peaceful rain. And I said, wow, I wish I knew that before we started.
Yeah, it would save you a lot of time. Yeah.
Anyway, so we ended up, there was like 2 5-channel tracks of really just, we tried to find the most peaceful sounding rain. And he goes, that's exactly what I want. And so through a couple of the scenes, that's all you hear. And we didn't get rid of all the different sweeteners and textures, but in a couple of, longer playing scenes, that's what you'll hear. Yeah, sure. And it sort of is very cool. At first I thought, wow, that's, you're not hearing all these literal sounds from cut to cut, but it's like I love that it ended up being more poetic.
It
You
kind
know,
of it kind of helps the authenticity to it. I mean, I've only seen the film once, but I do remember not really thinking about it that much. And I've been in this business so long that I'm usually thinking about it. But when you can make something so convincing and natural like that, and just accept it, that's, I think we've done our jobs. We've done,
well, the
very,
cool part too is, you set the audience up with this calm, peaceful rain, and then out of the piece comes just his gun,
yeah.
out of nowhere. And we really came up with some really cool, fat and shocking sounds,
That was my
especially.
next question. Did you record those guns or
No, we
that's
did
library
not.
stuff?
Yes, we did. It was a combination of library stuff and we did record one gun, but it was just, it's like anytime you record something, it's like you still need other sounds. It's
Sure.
like, it's never quite enough, So it was a foundation of the sound, but in no sense ended up being really a sonic foundation because of the other elements that we had to include to really get that attack. And especially on the interior gunshots, I really wanted to get that tight reverb, that bam, it's just frightening sound. It really, it's not a gunshot with echo on it. It's just bam, within the four walls of a room. And I did back in the day actually record interior gunshots with Michael Mann on Thief.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, he goes, I want to record this gun. I have this gun. And I said, okay, let's go record it. And I said, I'll find we'll go rent a firing range that we can go record this. No, I want to do it in my office. I said, what? And he had offices right in back at Tadeo. What was that called? The old Hollywood Film Studio? Hollywood Film Studio or something?
Something like, yeah.
Anyway, he had an office there. And I said, what are we going to do? And he goes, well, I got a fireplace. We're going to put some sandbags in the fireplace. And I said, I don't know how safe this is. And he goes, let's just record like 3 or 4. I just want to get that sound, And sure as shit, man, we went in there and recorded gunshot. Michael Mann's office.
It doesn't surprise me at all, but wow.
Yeah, I got to get the Michael Mann experience early in my career on Thief and Manhunter, and then he hired us for Miami Vice and then Crime Story. Mm-hmm. And after that, it was a great experience, but I felt, someone else needed to enjoy that.
I've heard stories from Elliot also about working with him. One of the shows I saw on your list I'd like to talk to you about, just because it's an opportunity to be completely unconventional if you want to, but I see you did How the Grinch Stole Christmas.
Yes.
Now that seems to be something where you can just start fresh and new and just go a little crazy. What was your approach to that one?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The world is your oyster on that.
Exactly.
It's not defined by much of anything. I went back and I listened to the original Grinches.
The animated, yeah.
I didn't get much from that,
Yeah. So, but there is some fun stuff, but it's still, yeah.
Yeah. And so, Ron Howard just said, have fun with this. This is a whole different world. It's up to you to create. And we just had a fun we'd let our goofball come out, but it was really cool, like Whoville and the vibe of Whoville and all the sleigh, the sound of the sleigh. We actually had to back off. We had the Grinch's sleigh had such a great, cool sound, but Ron came in on the dub stage and it was pretty big. And, Frankie Montagna was mixing it and he goes, I don't know, you guys, it sounds really cool, but that might scare the kids, so we need to maybe tone it down a little. So we did that, but no, it was just fabulous. And to get all the, Christmas sounds and the snow Foley was a gas to do.
Who walked the Foley on that?
That was my brother, Gary Hecker did.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, I try to use him when I can afford to, and when he's hard to to get. Yeah. But I worked with Gary and Dan and John Resch, and
of course
I feel like I've got to work with the best of them. So
Sure.
no, it's awesome.
That's very cool. And yeah, North Hollywood Ice sells snow conveniently.
And that's what we did. A lot of people, I guess a lot of people go, it melts. And so we just use cornstarch and different things, which is cool. You can approximate the sound, but we were really smart. We had deliveries like sometimes 2, maybe 3 times a day.
Mhm.
It was very arduous. It was expensive, but I wanted to do it. And we did it with shaved ice and snow. And you would have to do the stuff in deep snow as soon as you got the shipment. So you had to prioritize what you were going to record as soon as it showed up, which cues, and then which cues you could sort of get away with as it, melted a little bit.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
but that's how we did that. That was all real stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I remember on Gremlins, Mark recorded a bunch of snow footsteps on location. And I remember there were a few shows where I would have loved to have folied it with real snow, but it just couldn't. But I remember cutting snow footsteps, and what a pain it was to make it work. But yeah, because nothing quite. There was a Monty Python sketch about fake snow in the production that they're filming somewhere. They're like filming it on the beach, but it was supposed to be snow. And
That's funny. I haven't
they
seen
had
that.
they had a product that they called in the sketch. It was called Windtrex, and it
Wind
says it looks more like snow than snow.
track.
It was
That's
so funny. I always think of that when I think of recording snow. But yeah, you mentioned John Fasal, and there's some brilliant sound effects recordists out there. I'm sure you work with a lot of them. We always try to push on this, the importance of, when you're able to and can afford it, and you have the schedule to go out and record fresh things and keep your palette new and fresh and all that. And obviously, if you have a special car in a show or something like that you can get and record, and what are some of your thoughts and philosophies on building a library for each show that when you're able to, with recording new material?
I like to go out and record stuff I don't have.
Mhm.
I always say, what's the point of having a library if like you just go out and re-record the same stuff all the time? I mean, some people just like to go out and record just to record, which is awesome if you have the time and the money and the compunction. Being here in LA, it's tough to get good recordings of anything, spending hours out there, and you come back and you listen to the stuff and it's well recorded, but you got noise. And I mean, even when you go into the desert, all of a sudden these guys are on dirt bikes out in the,
Yeah.
revving around, the dogs barking, the
No.
birds are chirping, the crickets are going, the wind's blowing.
I remember going out with Eric Potter early in my tenure and finding some good places, and then going back a year later, or even just a few months later, and seeing that it's starting to get built up, and it's you have to go further out, and pretty soon we're going 20 miles out to find a spot.
I've primarily only recorded with Eric and John and Charlie Campagna for the most part, other than myself or another sound editor on the crew. But I'm not a great sound effects recordist, but I can get what I need. But man, when it comes to getting good stuff, I always want to have a pro on board. But I do, if there's something special in a show, it's a no-brainer. You got to go out and record it. Just like on Road to Perdition, that 38 Plymouth, I wanted that thing to sound real. I didn't want to cheat it with anything else. I could have. I had other stuff that I could have cheated with, but I didn't. On Rollerball, there were a lot of vehicles. We went out and recorded some prototype Shelbys out in Las Vegas.
Oh, wow.
Very cool. A Cobra out in the desert. There, it was Shelby's, one of 6 in the world. We had that, but we did not have full reign of it. We were only able to go record while they were filming out in the desert. They were going to film some shots of it. They said, you can record the proceedings, but we're not going to sit there and do a set for you, so anyway, you just go out there and do your best from show to show. And we've recorded quite a bit on Man of Steel. We did man, some K-rail droppings from cranes, dragging. We found out, I forget where it was, out in Fillmore. We found a place that had a graveyard of cement light poles, if you can imagine.
Oh, wow.
Disposed of city cement light poles that were made of stone.
Yeah, I remember them.
And we got those and dragged them across things because we had a lot of shredding of cement, a lot of destruction in Man of Steel. And so we were dropping, 3,000-pound K-rails and dragging these light poles across the pile of light poles. We recorded, we got to go to Davis Montham and record 810 warthogs,
Oh, wow.
which was amazing. And that was cool because that film had military cooperation. So we were able to get out there and get some Blackhawks and get those 810 warthogs, which is, what a frightening sound that is in person. Oh my Lord. But yeah, I'd love to record as much as we need to record. And then by the same token, I love the magic of mixing sounds together, because like I said initially, you can go out and record the real McCoy, and then 8 times out of 10, you still have to sweeten it.
Sure.
So if I can find the right material and then start adding other sounds and making it something new, to me, it's even better than going out and recording. You're creating something that you could never record in the real world.
No, absolutely. It's great to go out and record the elements. The analogy I always use is, you're going to make a cake, but you go out and you got to get the best flour and the eggs and all that sort of thing. And then when you're actually cooking, sometimes that's the most fun part of it, is seeing it come together.
And with friends in the business as well, you go, oh, you know what? He recorded that 78 Porsche a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And you end up trading some libraries,
That was my job for many years at Weddington. And I think that one of the reasons they hired me early on was because I was a film fan, and I could say, okay, well, we're doing a Western and we need horses, and I'll look, okay, who did Silverado? I'll start calling up the people that, went through some of this stuff and get, we'll still record a lot of our own material, but it's always fun to go and see what people did. And it's another reason I'm sharing these stories, is people can get inspired by the adventures we've had.
Absolutely.
So you've worked on a bunch of superhero films too, haven't you? You've got a lot of, I see Watchmen there. I see Batman versus Superman. I see you did both cuts of Justice League. Now that's a story there. The first cut was how long? The original version, the consumer version?
The consumer version was 2 hours and change. It was 2 hours or something.
And then Zach's version
was 4 hours.
So, so how much, where do I start? How much material cut for the first one were you able to move? I mean, it's completely blown up, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, we started on the film with Zach until his daughter tragically passed and he left the project. We got through the director's cut temp dub, and that was a 3-hour version. So we sort of had a good skeletal build of the film at that juncture, but minus a lot of visual effects. There was still quite a bit of green screen and whatnot. But creatively, we had already started, working on all the essential elements of the film, at least in an elementary and, foundational way. And so, but when Joss came on the film, we had to throw out a lot. I mean, he reshot for 7 weeks in London. So he threw out a lot of Zach's stuff and put in 7 weeks of, new story, new funny stuff that the superheroes tried to interact. I think Warner Brothers was trying to give it a little bit of a Avengers spin, a little cutesy spin. I think they were feeling like Zach's angle was maybe a tad too dark or whatever. So yeah, we ended up, preparing Joss's version, and we still saved those sessions, from our original director's cut build. So when we ended up with the 4-hour version, we went back to, those original sessions to get as much of that as a starting point.
Right.
But then as visual effects matured, obviously, we had to embellish and keep up with all the visual effects through the whole process. So it was pretty arduous. I went through, and to figure it out, I had saved the continuities of the couple of different versions that we had gotten through with Zach, and then all the versions that we went through with Joss. And for any of the action scenes, Joss used Zach's footage. There's no way he was going to reshoot all those action set pieces. So those were still in Joss's version. And so those ultimately ended up the most sonically mature to start with, right? So we just went to Joss's version where we had developed all those sounds for those big action scenes. But the problem was by the time we conformed those sessions, because Zach opened them up and made them twice as long, there were holes like through the whole scene. So just like conforming it and smoothing it all out to make it feel like it wasn't a Frankenstein was a job for Jesus. And
I was going to say, with the conform notes actually reflecting the
change note.
I don't quite know how to ask, but you know what I'm asking. How useful were the old conform to the new, if there's so many?
It was really, it was crazy. And thank God I got a couple of guys that had originally worked on the original Justice League. So there was some continuity there of a few of us that knew where the bodies, where the bodies were buried and what material was where.
Yeah.
But I came up with a whole grid of what scenes were the most sonically mature at what versions. And we went and got all the stuff. We'd saved it all and on the server since we did it here at Formosa. We were able to get back to all those sessions and reconstruct what we could, and then cut all the new material that we never had cut. So we had an extra, I'd say about an extra hour to hour 15 minutes that we had never prepared of Zach's stuff that was never in there.
Yeah.
And we did that. It was slightly overlapped with finishing Army of the Dead. So get this. So I felt bad because so many people during COVID, during 2020, were out of work.
Yeah.
And I was supposed to be done with Army of the Dead by June of 2020, just little bit into COVID. And I thought, well, I probably won't work the rest of the year. But in May, Warner Brothers, because of the COVID, Warner Brothers and HBO Max said, Zach, you can do your 4-hour version that will stream.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, I had a 4-hour movie on my hands that took us through 2020 and into 21. So I will officially say in my 44 years in this business, it was the busiest year of my career.
Wow. Now, where did you work? Where were you working for this? Did you work out of home or?
Well, we were on Army of the Dead working here at Formosa in Santa Monica.
Right.
And then we all went home. It was insane trying to figure that workflow out. But the good news was on Army of the Dead, we already had a pretty good build. So I like working with my crew. As a matter of fact, here at Formosa, I've got my whole crew, a whole hallway. So I can just go from room to room and work with the editors. I love collaborating. Some sound supervisors, they don't care if their editors are at home. They just figure out, and I don't know how they do that. They do it. But I just love collaborating and reviewing material, spotting material, and doing fixes together. And it's really just a lot of fun for me. And I think the editors enjoy the collaboration too, with all the time you're stuck in a room by yourself, But anyway, yeah, Justice League, we did from home. So get this, our assistant, Brad Sokol, was the only one that had a remote system that was tied to the server at Formosa.
Wow.
So all the material had to come in through to him and dispersed by him to the editors at home with varying degrees of internet connectivity. You can imagine downloading material you did overnight, you just had to get smart about what you did, at various times of the day. And we got through it. The only way, these sessions were so big, by the way, Steve, you couldn't play them all because the reels, get this, it was 4 1-hour reels, because originally it was going to be in 4 1-hour episodes. But
Oh,
then
interesting.
they got into this thing with SAG where they go, oh, you're using the word episode. Well, that means TV. So now the SAG actors need to be compensated in a different way. And so they were like, no, it's a movie. It's a movie. We're not going to do episodes. But we still finished it on 4 1-hour reels. So these sessions
Reels, yeah.
were huge.
Yeah,
Yeah, don't call them episodes anymore. These are reels. So the sessions were so big that you had to inactivate certain tracks just to play stuff. It was really cumbersome.
No,
So
I remember hearing, like, at the ranch when they were doing one of the prequels to Star Wars, that they would have these super sessions that would literally take an hour and a half to load before they could even try playing it.
yeah. So the only way I was able to review material is the editors would have to give me crash downs.
Yeah, sure.
We get 5-1 crash downs of certain things. I'd make notes, send them back, and just that's how we got through the whole thing. It was crazy. But then we obviously ended up mixing at Warner Brothers on a couple stages and finished in fine form. It was great. I don't know how we did it in hindsight, but it's amazing how I think it was great for everyone. It really forced all of us to figure out new creative and inventive ways of working.
How long was the whole schedule for that?
It was from August and we finished in February.
Wow.
It sounds like a long time, but for a 4-hour movie, it was pretty consolidated.
Yeah.
It was pretty tight.
Yeah. Doing 2 or 3 features.
We were on the original Justice League in 2017 for almost a year on a 2-hour movie.
Yeah.
Just with all of the reshoots and all that. So 6 hours of Justice League we got to work on. And
were there any new recording sessions or any new material for the longer version that you needed to go at, or was there a time for that?
No, because we pretty much had pretty much everything that we needed. If you think about all the recording we did for Man of Steel, we did so much recording for that. And then on Batman, Superman, we did quite a bit of recording as well. And then on then Justice League, it was sort of like, okay, we sort of have everything. Wonder Woman, who was introduced at the end of Batman, Superman, really didn't have any vehicles or anything. It was all design stuff for her lasso and her boosh power, her big power blast. It was pretty much all sound design elements. So we didn't really need a lot of new recordings to develop that material. So yeah, we were pretty good to go after that. So
That's
it was
very cool.
a lot of fun. I mean, just the world, all the different worlds and superhero powers, the variety of stuff was just incredible, just amazing. So it was a great experience between the two. I don't regret any of it. It was actually sort of fun going through the process with Joss Whedon. He was good to us, and it was interesting, his direction. But then it was wonderful to be able to come back and realize Zach's original vision. I love working with Zach and have worked with him since 2004 on Dawn of the Dead. So it's been a fruitful, relationship and a wonderful one.
Very cool. Israel has a question from the gallery here.
Sure.
Do you sometimes get blocked and don't know how to solve a particular issue? What do you do when you get sound block?
It's wow, it happens a lot.
But
not like in a detrimental way. I'll have to say, even after all these years, every time I start a movie, I think, how the hell are we going to do this? I mean, it's like they all have their challenges. There's no easy film. It's like sometimes after working on a really busy action film, Mad Max or a superhero film, you'll get to like a normal drama or something, and people think like, oh, that show will be easier. I'm like, ooh,
not necessarily.
The detail and the nuances now, big loud films sometimes are actually easier because there's plenty of places to hide, right?
That's true.
But to answer the question more succinctly, I think you just struggle through it all. And the great thing is you just sit there and you keep experimenting. until it's sort of like a scientist, an alchemist, pouring different chemicals together, and all of a sudden something goes,
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
go, whoa, that was awesome. What did I do?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and
Um,
also what you were saying about collaboration and having wonderful people that you're working with that are making and recording things. Yeah,
Absolutely. I'm a firm believer in, two heads are better than one. For me to collaborate, I would never claim I have all the answers. And I love working with creative people. It brings out the best in me, and hopefully I bring the best out in them. And it's beautiful that way.
speaking of which, we've had, of course, my old pal and my former boss, Mark Mangini, on a couple times, and we had David White on not too long ago to talk about Mad Max. I would love to hear your side of that crazy show, because that was one hell of a show. There's so many vehicles and things in that. All the people who worked on it, I would love to hear their side of that madness.
Absolutely. Well, my entree to the film was I got a call from Chris Jenkins in beginning of August of 14, and it was a Friday, and he said, "Can you be in Australia on Monday?"
And you, of course, said, sure.
Oh, I wanted to say sure. I go, "Are you kidding me? You're working to work with George Miller on Mad Max?" I mean, but I can't. I mean, I couldn't leave. I was remodeling my house. I had 5 different contractors crawling all over my place, and I had to gracefully decline. I was just about to start with Formosa, literally in a couple of weeks.
Right.
And I said, "Listen, Chris, call Matt Dubin. There's like 7 other Formosa supervisors, super talented guys. I bet you, he'll be able to help you find someone." And Mark was available to go. He went there for like a month just to help them. They were having a lot of really technical and organizational, challenges. And Mark stayed there for a good month, and just to get them through a temp dub, which was a really tough stretch. And they got through that. But I think at the end of it, they sort of realized that there was something that, the film still needed sonically. And I think Mark suggested to them, you know what, it's like we can't stay in Australia anymore. And I think Chris Jenkins and God love him, Greg Rudloff, they had to come back to the States. They couldn't hang in Australia anymore. They said, "We'd love to continue working with you, but hopefully you can do this in the States." And so George said, "You know what? I'm going to talk to Warner Brothers about this." And so George got that, the permission to do that. The only thing is George doesn't work quickly. And by the time he was ready to come to the States to finish, Mark was on Black Mass, I think. He really wasn't available to follow through immediately. So I was just starting at Formosa, and my Batman Superman didn't start until December of that year. And I said, "Here I go, man. Put me in, coach." So the film got here, and primarily the vehicles were pretty much constructed from scratch.
Yeah.
And a lot of the action elements as well just needed a little extra personality and oomph. And so we did that. We worked 7 days a week. The only day that we had off was Thanksgiving. And we dubbed literally 15-hour days, 7 days a week. And George sat there patiently, quietly. He was there from 9 a.m. till the time we wrapped. Patient as can be, beautiful man, and just was blown away. He said, you and your crew have sonically reimagined this film and reinvigorated this film. And so we completed that, and we were done with the final mix, but they hadn't gone to the MPAA yet. And when they watched it, there were some MPAA changes that needed to be done. And when they did that, George said, "Can I mix for a couple extra weeks too, once we do the fixes? I'd like to just continue mixing a little while." So at that point, I started on Batman Superman, and Mark had just finished Black Mass. So Mark came in and finished up the last handful of weeks of mixing, and then he did like the voluminous weeks of all the versions and things like that. And so he put the bone and ribbon on it, and there you have it.
Yeah.
All its glory, man.
Yeah.
What a beautiful sounding film. It's just, I don't know, beautiful. Yeah, it was beautiful, but man,
You know,
was...
it surprised me. I remember seeing it in Atmos, of course, and just being blown away about how huge it was, but just how detailed and
yeah,
yeah, it wasn't overblown at all. It was like everything that needed to be there was there, and in its own wonderful way, its own character, and it was just it's a really slick job. It's the golden paperweights were well earned on that one. It was
yeah, no, it's fun, but it was like it happened so fast. When it came back in October, I had to put a crew together almost over a weekend, and it was busy. But I ended up, getting Phil Berry and Chris Odd, myself, a couple other folks, but it was a small crew. It was like, I think 4 of us, just on the sound effects. Kira Wrestler, continued on the dialogue chair.
Yeah.
And it all went so fast. It was such a fast moving train. You get to the end of one of those and you're like, it was just a blur.
Yeah. Yeah.
A beautiful, but
absolutely.
But a pleasure. It was so much fun. Of that, we got to go to London for the BAFTAs.
Mm-hmm.
Ended up, getting one of the Australian Academy Awards, which was cool. George Miller was so cool. He mailed all of us statues, and he didn't have to do that.
Oh, no, he's a real sweet guy. I got to talk to George a bit at Greg's memorial when we had dinner that one night. Were you there?
Yes, I was there.
That's right. You were there. Yeah.
He flew there explicitly for that funeral, man.
That's the kind of guy Greg is, and everybody just adored him. And I don't know if there's anything you can add to that. I mean, he was
I feel so blessed that I got to work with him for a couple of months, literally hand in hand on that film.
Yeah.
It was just so tragic and so sad to see him go all of a sudden. But man, I just thought, wow, I got to work with them at the peak of all of it, Yeah. And it was an experience I won't forget. I spent many, many hours with him on that dub stage, and I thank him for that, for sure.
No, he's a brilliant guy. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
We only have a few more minutes. I like to keep these around an hour.
Okay.
And usually at the end, I like to ask my guest, and I always say it the same way. When we started in the business, things were much different, and there were different ways of getting in. When you're just starting out and trying to start in this crazy business, the advice you would give someone back then is different than you would right now. But there are some things that are still the same, like hard work and perseverance and networking and that sort of thing. But what are some of the things you would give to as advice to someone who wants to break into this crazy world of film sound?
The initial things are the obvious, what you said. If you've got a passion, don't let it go. Just as daunting as it seems to climb the mountain of Hollywood, Mount Hollywood, it's not, man. It's one footstep at a time, and just work your ass off, make yourself valuable to whomever. Volunteer to work on student films, work on people's shorts, documentaries, do whatever you can to just get more experience. Yeah. Even as Foley artists, it's funny, it's like my brother would sit in front of the TV and just in his living room and sit there and take a character and practice. I mean, it sounds silly, but it's so simple.
Yeah.
Just to do as much of it as you can. Buy a cheap portable recorder and start going out and recording your own sounds and start to catalog them. And
that's how I did it.
Just have at it. It's so much fun. It's so much hard work, but it's so much fun that you won't realize how hard you're working. Sometimes you will when you're lacking in sleep, because this job is definitely a young person's job. That's for sure.
It's gotten to that point, especially when so many of the disciplines cross and you have one guy doing everything, really. I mean,
It's a good thing I still think of myself as just a responsible teenager. Otherwise, if I bought into how old I was, I probably wouldn't have the energy to do this anymore.
That's,
Just
I
a
do a
young-
lot of, I do a lot of voice work too. So my joke is, when we talk about how old I am, well, at least I'm still doing teenagers' voices for projects. So, hey, but yeah, I get that. It's like, it's a little daunting when, we're not moving quite as fast as we were, but
Well, you know what? I'm still having just as much fun. So it doesn't matter how old I'm getting. I just still feel very youthful inside. And man, all the challenges of every show and the pleasure of working with my colleagues just fills my time and fills my heart. So it's awesome.
Absolutely. Scott, I'm so glad you could do this. And a quick other note, I would love to get your brother on here, Gary the Wrecker Hecker. He's a legend. I would love to.
He's a fun guy to talk to too, man.
I would. Would he do this if I asked?
He would do it, I'm sure.
Okay.
I don't want to speak for him, but I'm sure he would.
Okay.
And you do a lot of voice stuff. He does, even though he's a Foley artist, he does a lot of just amazing vocals, man.
Oh, that's fun.
He's like in every one of the films that I do vocally.
Oh, yeah, you sneak him in there. Yeah. That's how I started.
Yeah. It's just like he's just really, really good at mimicking things, and especially doing animalistic type stuff. He's really, really talented, but I think you'd have a good time with him.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, that's how I started doing the voice thing, because at Weddington, we would, occasionally, pull people from the office to do incidental
Absolutely.
things. And I just sort of got the reputation for, that's how I got to do the Coke Polar Bear.
So you're the Mel Blanc of Weddington.
I was kind of, in a sense. Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Scott, thanks so much. I appreciate it. We'll have you on again in a few weeks, maybe, and talk some more stories about your shows.
Whenever you like, man, just give me a ring. I'm always here, and I love talking about what we do. It's a pleasure.
I really appreciate that. Everyone in the audience watching this live and streaming, thank you so much. Glad you're here. We'll see you at the next one. Everyone keep listening.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
See ya. Thanks,
Take
Scott.
care. Bye-bye now.